Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Teaching practices in discourse analysis. Interactive assistant teaching practices refer to the strategies, methods, and interactions that teachers use to facilitate learning in the classroom. In discourse analysis, teaching practices are examined to understand how language shapes classroom dynamics, instructional techniques, and student engagement. Discourse analysis helps uncover the underlying structures of communication between teachers and students, revealing how language reflects power relations, pedagogical beliefs, and cultural norms in educational settings. By analyzing teaching practices through the lens of discourse, researchers can explore how teachers use language to construct knowledge, manage classroom behavior, support student learning, and convey expectations. Discourse analysis also sheds light on how students respond to these practices and how their identities as learners are shaped through classroom interactions. Key features of teaching practices in discourse analysis. 1. Instructional language and explanation. Teachers use instructional language to explain concepts, give directions, and guide student learning. Discourse analysis examines how this language is structured to make content accessible and meaningful to students, as well as how different forms of explanation support or hinder understanding. Example: in a math lesson, a teacher might explain a complex concept by breaking it down into smaller steps. First, let's add these two numbers. Now, multiply the result by 4. Finally, subtract 10 from the total. Discourse analysis would explore how the teacher's language simplifies the process, scaffolding students' understanding by using a step-by-step approach. 2. Questioning techniques. Teachers frequently use questions to assess students' understanding, promote critical thinking, and engage students in discussion. Discourse analysis focuses on the types of questions teachers ask, open-ended versus closed-ended, how questions are framed, and how they influence student participation and thinking. Example: in a literature class, a teacher might ask, "Why do you think the character chose to act this way?" An open-ended question, versus, "Did the character make the right decision?" A closed-ended question. Discourse analysis would explore how open-ended questions encourage students to think more deeply and develop their ideas, while closed-ended questions might limit responses to yes, no answers. 3. Feedback and evaluation. The way teachers provide feedback on student performance plays a key role in shaping learning outcomes and student motivation. Discourse analysis investigates how feedback is delivered, whether it is positive or negative, and how it influences student engagement and self-efficacy. Example: after a student gives an incorrect answer, a teacher might say, "That's a good start, but let's think about it in a different way." Discourse analysis would explore how this feedback acknowledges the student's effort while gently guiding them toward the correct answer, helping maintain the student's confidence and participation. 4. Classroom management and discipline. Teachers use language to manage student behavior, establish rules, and maintain order in the classroom. Discourse analysis examines how language is used to reinforce authority, set expectations, and negotiate compliance with classroom norms. Example: a teacher might use firm, directive language such as, "Please stop talking and focus on the lesson," or softer, more inclusive language like, "Let's all quiet down so we can focus together." Discourse analysis would focus on how these different approaches reflect the teacher's style of classroom management and how they influence student compliance and engagement. 5. Power dynamics in teacher-student interactions. Teaching practices are often shaped by power dynamics between teachers and students. Discourse analysis explores how language reflects and reinforces authority in the classroom, how teachers control or share power, and how students are positioned in the learning process. Example: in a traditional classroom, a teacher might use authoritative language such as, "You must complete this assignment by tomorrow," reinforcing their control over the learning environment. In contrast, a teacher who says, "Let's decide together on a fair deadline," might be sharing power with students, fostering a more collaborative classroom culture. Discourse analysis would explore how these power dynamics shape student-teacher relationships and learning outcomes. 6. Teacher-student interaction patterns. Discourse analysis examines the interaction patterns between teachers and students, including who speaks, for how long, and in what sequence. These patterns reveal the teacher's role in facilitating dialogue, encouraging student participation, and fostering a balanced exchange of ideas. Example: in a Socratic seminar, the teacher might take a more passive role, encouraging students to lead the discussion. Discourse analysis would focus on how the teacher uses language to prompt deeper thinking without dominating the conversation, promoting a more student-centered learning environment. 7. Cultural and linguistic sensitivity. In diverse classrooms, teaching practices often involve navigating cultural and linguistic differences. Discourse analysis explores how teachers adapt their language and instructional practices to accommodate students from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds, promoting inclusivity and equity. Example: in a multilingual classroom, a teacher might use simple language or visual aids to ensure that students who are non-native speakers understand the lesson. Discourse analysis would explore how the teacher's language choices support inclusivity and how they help bridge language barriers to facilitate learning. Methods for analyzing teaching practices in discourse. 1. Conversation analysis. Conversation analysis is used to examine the structure of classroom talk, focusing on turn-taking, question-answer sequences, interruptions, and pauses. This method is particularly useful for analyzing how teachers and students manage the flow of interaction in the classroom. Example: conversation analysis of a classroom discussion might reveal that the teacher frequently interrupts students or gives them little time to respond. This analysis would explore how these interaction patterns influence student participation and engagement. 2. Critical discourse analysis, CDA. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, investigates how teaching practices reflect and reproduce broader social and institutional power structures. CDA examines how language in the classroom reinforces or challenges norms related to authority, hierarchy, and inequality. Example: a CDA of teacher-student interactions might reveal that teachers use more directive language with students from marginalized backgrounds, reinforcing power imbalances and limiting these students' opportunities for self-expression. The analysis would explore how these discourses contribute to educational inequality. 3. Ethnographic discourse analysis. Ethnographic discourse analysis combines discourse analysis with ethnographic observation to study how teaching practices unfold in real-world educational settings. This method examines how language use is influenced by the cultural and social context of the classroom. Example: in a study of a bilingual classroom, ethnographic discourse analysis might focus on how teachers switch between languages to accommodate different students' needs. The analysis would explore how this practice affects student participation and learning outcomes in a multicultural setting. 4. Interactional sociolinguistics. Interactional sociolinguistics focuses on how social identities and relationships are constructed through language in interaction. This method is used to analyze how teachers and students negotiate roles, relationships, and cultural norms through their communication. Example: interactional sociolinguistics might analyze how a teacher's use of informal language with students fosters a relaxed, supportive classroom atmosphere, positioning the teacher as approachable and reducing the social distance between teacher and students. Examples of teaching practices in discourse analysis. Example 1. Questioning techniques in science education. In a science classroom, teachers often use questioning to prompt critical thinking and inquiry. Discourse analysis of a teacher's questioning techniques might reveal how different types of questions, such as, "What do you think will happen if we change this variable?" encourage students to hypothesize and engage in scientific reasoning. The analysis would focus on how the teacher uses open-ended questions to promote inquiry-based learning. Example 2. Feedback in writing instruction. In a writing class, teachers provide feedback on student work to guide improvement. Discourse analysis might examine how a teacher's feedback, phrased as ***, "You've made great progress on your thesis, but let's work on developing your supporting arguments further," balances praise with constructive criticism. The analysis would explore how this feedback motivates the student while promoting growth in specific areas of writing. Example 3. Classroom management in early childhood education. In early childhood classrooms, teachers use language to manage behavior and set expectations for young learners. Discourse analysis might focus on how a teacher uses positive reinforcement, such as, "Great job cleaning up your desk. Now let's get ready for story time," to encourage compliance and cooperation. The analysis would explore how language creates a supportive, structured environment that fosters positive behavior. Example 4. Power dynamics in high school classrooms. In a high school classroom, teachers often assert authority through directives and discipline. Discourse analysis might reveal how a teacher's language, such as, "You need to hand in your assignment by Friday, no exceptions," reinforces hierarchical power dynamics. The analysis would explore how these power relations impact student engagement and the overall classroom climate. Example 5. Linguistic accommodation in multilingual classrooms. In multilingual classrooms, teachers often adapt their language to meet the needs of non-native speakers. Discourse analysis might examine how a teacher uses strategies like paraphrasing, repeating key points, or using visual aids to ensure comprehension. For example, a teacher might say, "Let me explain that again in simpler words," to clarify a concept. The analysis would focus on how these accommodations create an inclusive learning environment and support students' language development. Challenges in analyzing teaching practices through discourse. 1. Complexity of classroom interactions. Classroom interactions are dynamic and involve multiple participants, making it challenging to capture all the nuances of communication. Discourse analysts must pay close attention to the verbal and nonverbal aspects of communication and the broader social context of the classroom. 2. Context dependence. Teaching practices are shaped by specific institutional, cultural, and social contexts, making it difficult to generalize findings across different educational settings. Discourse analysts must account for these contextual factors when interpreting language use in classrooms. 3. Power and hierarchy. The inherent power imbalance between teachers and students can affect how teaching practices are analyzed. Discourse analysts must be sensitive to how authority and control shape classroom interactions and influence the interpretation of discourse patterns. Conclusion. Teaching practices are central to shaping how students learn and engage in educational settings, and discourse analysis offers a valuable lens for understanding how language functions in these practices. By examining instructional language, questioning techniques, feedback, classroom management, and power dynamics, discourse analysis provides insights into how teaching practices support or hinder student learning, participation, and identity formation. Whether analyzing teacher-student interactions, classroom management strategies, or feedback mechanisms, discourse analysis highlights the complex role that language plays in creating effective and equitable educational environments. Through this approach, educators can reflect on and improve their teaching practices to foster more inclusive and engaging learning experiences. Frequently asked questions. What are teaching practices, and why are they relevant in discourse analysis? Teaching practices are the strategies, methods, and interactions that teachers use to facilitate learning. Discourse analysis examines these practices to uncover how language influences classroom dynamics, reflects power structures, and shapes the teaching and learning process, offering insights into effective communication in educational settings. How does discourse analysis explore instructional language used by teachers? Discourse analysis investigates how teachers use language to make complex concepts accessible, explain directions, and guide student learning. By analyzing language structure, such as breaking tasks into steps, discourse analysis reveals how teachers scaffold understanding and help students engage with challenging material. Why are questioning techniques important in teaching practices, and how does discourse analysis examine them? Questions help assess understanding, foster critical thinking, and engage students in discussion. Discourse analysis looks at the types of questions used, open-ended versus closed-ended, and how they prompt students to think deeply, with open-ended questions often promoting more elaborate responses and critical thinking. What role does feedback play in teaching? According to Discourse Analysis, feedback shapes student motivation, confidence, and learning outcomes. Discourse analysis examines how feedback is delivered, e.g., praise versus constructive criticism, studying the language used to understand how teachers guide improvement and whether their feedback encourages or discourages further engagement. How are power dynamics in teacher-student interactions analyzed through discourse? Discourse analysis explores language that reflects authority, such as directive language or collaborative phrases, to understand how teachers assert control or share power in the classroom. This analysis reveals how power dynamics affect student participation, engagement, and the overall classroom climate. What interaction patterns in classrooms are analyzed in discourse analysis? Discourse analysis studies who speaks, when, and for how long, identifying patterns in teacher-student exchanges. For instance, in student-centered learning, teachers might prompt discussion without dominating it, encouraging a balanced exchange of ideas, while traditional methods might show teacher-led dialogue. How does discourse analysis address cultural and linguistic sensitivity in teaching? In diverse classrooms, discourse analysis looks at how teachers adapt language and instructional techniques to accommodate students from various cultural and linguistic backgrounds. This includes analyzing simple language, visual aids, and other methods that promote inclusivity and support understanding among all students. What methods are commonly used to analyze teaching practices through discourse? Conversation analysis studies the structure of classroom talk, such as turn-taking and pauses. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, examines how language reflects power and social structures in education. Ethnographic discourse analysis observes real-world classroom practices in their social and cultural context. Interactional sociolinguistics focuses on how social identities and roles are negotiated through language in classroom settings. How are teaching practices in multilingual classrooms analyzed? In multilingual settings, discourse analysis examines how teachers accommodate language differences through techniques like paraphrasing, repetition, and visual aids. This analysis shows how language adaptation promotes inclusivity and supports language development for non-native speakers. What challenges do researchers face when analyzing teaching practices through discourse? Classroom interactions are complex, context-dependent, and influenced by power dynamics, making it difficult to capture every nuance. Discourse analysts must navigate these factors carefully, taking into account both verbal and nonverbal cues, and considering cultural and institutional contexts to accurately interpret classroom language.